Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Proudfoot podcast. Today, on our 23rd episode, we are going to be talking about conditions and death in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. So let's get started. The reason we're talking about conditions and death is because they go hand in hand. There is one special condition which we're going to talk about in a few minutes called unconscious. This is the only condition that you get by dropping to 0 hit points. All other conditions come as a result of someone doing something to you, whether this is using an ability, casting a spell, or simply grabbing or shoving you, like with the conditions grappled and prone, which, like we talked about last episode, come from being grappled or shoved. So all the other conditions, there are 13 of them that are negative. They all come from either a monster's ability or a special kind of weapon or a spell. Typically, they will say exactly how you get the condition. So typically there is a roll of some kind. Maybe it's a save, like a strength save, a dex save, con save, whatever it might happen to be. And if you fail the save, you get the condition. Then the condition effects are all outlined in Appendix A of the Player's Handbook. That's on page 290 to 292. And it'll say what happens. You might be disadvantaged on certain kinds of checks, maybe attack rolls, maybe people have advantage on hitting you. All sorts of things can happen with conditions. The source that inflicts it will also tell you how to get rid of it. So sometimes if it's a save per se, you might get to make that save every turn, and as soon as you succeed, the condition ends. Or the condition lasts only for a round or for a few rounds. Or sometimes it's until it can be countered in some way. So prone, the only way to end the prone condition, as we talked about last time, is to stand up, please. And other things like being grappled ends as soon as the person grappling you lets go or a magical effect ends it of some kind. So depending on what the condition is, it might have a way to be countered per se. And sometimes with certain kinds of poison, there's antidotes or something the DM might introduce. So there might be other ways of ending or countering the poison condition depending on what items you have on hand. But typically for a condition, whatever inflicts the condition will tell you how to remove the condition. Okay, so that brings us to the unconscious condition. So let's talk about that. Unconscious, what does it mean? It means you've been knocked out. It means that you have been dropped to 0 hit points. Now, when you get dropped to 0 hit points in D&D, you now get to encounter death, which is on page 197 of the Player's Handbook. And this is the rules and regulations for how to not die and how to die in D&D. So a few bad notes. First things first, if you drop to your negative in hit points, you instantly die in D&D. There's a few ways you can get around that with some high-level spells that can bring creatures back from the dead. But generally speaking, if your hit points are 15 and you're at 2 HP and someone hits you for 17 damage, you're now at negative 15 and you instantly die. Now, it has to be the hit that knocks you out that does that. So it can't be after you're knocked to 0, then someone just comes and keeps beating on you, whittling away all those negative HP points. No, that's not how it works. It's just that initial hit. Unless your DM is playing a very hardcore game where they're going to say, no, a monster's going to go up and hit you, and they can somehow keep track of how much damage they've dealt, but that feels a little bit cheap and almost like the DM's picking on you, and I wouldn't want to do that at my table at least. But I want to talk about saving throws. So let's say you don't drop to your negative in hit points. Let's say you only get hit for 5 in that case when you're at 2, and you're at negative 3. Now you're unconscious. Now you're making death saving throws, which are the unique type of saving throw in D&D. There is no other saving throw like it since it's not tied to any ability score. That's right, you do not apply any sort of modifier, you do not get proficiency in death saves. It is just a straight D20 roll. You need a 10 or higher, but you need to get 10 or higher 3 times before you get 9 or less 3 times. So basically on your character sheet, there's a little tally box where it tallies your successes and your failures. You need 3 successes before 3 failures. If you get 3 successes before 3 failures, congratulations, you are now stable, which means you're still at 0 HP, but you're no longer making death saving throws. You can also be stabilized by another player. All someone has to do is come up to you and do a medicine check. It's a DC 10, so if they roll a 10 or higher after applying their mod, you are stabilized, which means you are no longer making death saving throws, but you are still unconscious and at 0 hit points. However, if a creature comes up and hits you again, then you become unstable and go back to making death saving throws. So good rule of thumb for players is if someone's down, try and heal them as soon as possible so that they don't have to perpetually make death saving throws, because it's a little bit riskier than I just laid out, because rolling 1s and 20s on your death saves has a profound impact. So normally crits, like crit successes, crit failures, do not apply to saving throws. They apply to your attack rolls, and it's very common house rule that they apply to ability checks, although that's technically not in the rules. They do not apply to saves. In a death save, though, they do. If you get a 1, that's 2 failures instantly. So that's risky, because then only 1 more failure and you are dead, because as soon as you get 3 failures before 3 successes, that's also death in D&D. But if you get a D20, you are upped immediately and at 1 HP. which is really cool. So it does go both ways, and I'd say the 20 is better than the 1 is worse, so don't worry too much about that. Hopefully your party has a healer, and hopefully it's not the healer that has become unconscious and now has to make death saving throws. Okay, that is everything I want to talk about in today's episode of the Eddie Proudfoot podcast. If you enjoyed it, please follow us on Instagram, Spotify, or Twitter. And as always, may the gods have mercy on your soul.